I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, because what I'm about to tell you changed everything I thought I knew about family. The heat woke me before anything else, not the gentle warmth of morning sun through bedroom curtains. This was different. Aggressive. The kind of heat that presses down on your chest and steals the moisture from your mouth before you even open your eyes. I tried to move. My limbs felt heavy, disconnected like they belonged to someone else. My head throbbed with a dull ache that pulsed behind my temples. For a moment I couldn't remember where I was. Couldn't remember anything beyond the fog filling every corner of my mind. Then I opened my eyes. Blue. Endless, blinding blue stretched above me. I blinked, trying to focus, and felt it the gentle rocking motion beneath me, the smell of water and sun-baked metal, the complete terrifying silence. I wasn't in my bed. I wasn't in the rental house. I was on a boat, in the middle of Lake Mojave, alone. Well, not completely alone. Stella lay curled beside me, still wearing her bright orange life vest. My daughter, my baby girl. Her face was flushed, the bridge of her nose already showing signs of sunburn. Her lips were cracked and dry, but her chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. She was breathing. She was alive. Thank God. I touched her forehead with trembling fingers. Warm, but not dangerously hot. Her pulse was steady when I pressed my fingers to her wrist. Whatever had happened to us, she was okay. For now. I pulled the blanket over her head, creating shade, then forced myself to look around. Water stretched in every direction. The surface of Lake Mojave reflected the merciless Arizona sun like liquid glass. No other boats, no shoreline close enough to matter. No sound except the gentle lap of water against aluminum and the awful oppressive silence that comes from being truly alone. My hands moved on autopilot, checking the boat. The engine key slot was empty. I looked for the oars. The ropes were still tied to their cleats, but the oars themselves were gone. I searched the storage compartments with increasing panic. No flares, no whistle, no radio, nothing. Someone had stripped this boat of everything we needed to survive. That's when my eyes landed on the thermos, the one Caroline had handed me this morning with that perfect smile. Drink up, Aria, herbal tea. It'll help with the heat. I picked it up with shaking hands and sniffed the opening. Chamomile may be honey, but underneath something else, something bitter and wrong. My stomach turned. Then I saw it. A piece of paper folded neatly and pinned under a smooth rock near my bag. My hands shook as I lifted the rock and unfolded the note. The handwriting was Daniel's. I'd know it anywhere. I'd taught him to write after all, sitting at our kitchen table when he was 6 years old, guiding his small hand across the page. The note said, "Mom, I'm sorry. You left me no choice." No signature, no explanation. Just those 8 words written in my son's careful script. I read it once, twice, 3 times, trying to make it mean something different, trying to make it not real. But the truth was there in the empty engine, in the missing oars, in the drug-laced tea, and the fact that Daniel and Caroline were nowhere to be seen. My body went cold despite the heat pressing down on us. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't some terrible misunderstanding. My son did this. Daniel, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd helped through every hardship, had drugged me, disabled this boat, and left me and his 12-year-old sister alone in the middle of Lake Mojave. To die. Let me back up because you need to understand how I got here. How a 48-year-old woman who thought she knew her own son ended up fighting for her life on a boat in the Arizona desert. My name is Aria Sullivan, and 3 days ago I was just trying to balance a budget that refused to balance. It was past midnight on a Tuesday. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional car passing on our street in Chandler, Arizona. Stella had fallen asleep on the couch again, math homework spread across the coffee table, her oversized hoodie pulled over her head. I looked at the bills spread across my kitchen table and did the math one more time, hoping the numbers would somehow change. They didn't. Electric bill $187. Water $94. Groceries $320 if I was careful. Stella's school supplies $67. My blood pressure medication that insurance wouldn't fully cover $89. Total $757. Money in checking account $683. I'd been a widow for 3 years. My husband Michael died in a car accident on a Tuesday morning driving to work, hit by a semi-truck that ran a red light. The settlement from the trucking company had helped, but it wasn't much after the lawyers took their share. Between the medical bills from his final days and the funeral costs, most of it was gone within a year. These days I worked as a freelance accountant. It wasn't much, but it kept us afloat. Barely. Life had been quiet since Michael died. Small, manageable, just me and Stella in our 3-bedroom house making do with what we had. Then 2 months ago, everything changed. My older sister Clara passed away. Cancer took her fast, diagnosed in February, gone by April. We'd never been particularly close. She lived in Nevada, worked as a real estate agent, never married, no kids. I saw her maybe twice a year, usually at Christmas and sometimes for her birthday. When her lawyer called to read the will, I'd expected maybe a few family photos, perhaps some of her jewelry. What I got was 20 acres of land in Mojave County. It's currently valued at approximately $4.2 million, the lawyer said casually, like he was talking about the weather. With the right buyer, particularly given the upcoming development projects in the area, it could potentially sell for $12 to $15 million. I'd stared at my phone for a long time after that call ended. $4.2 million. I'd written that number down on a piece of paper just to see what it looked like, to make sure I'd heard correctly. The appraiser's report arrived 3 days later, confirming everything. Data centers were moving into the area, logistics hubs, tech companies looking for cheap land with good infrastructure. That land could change everything. Stella's college fund, a real one, not the measly savings account with $3,400 that I'd been desperately trying to grow. A house without a leaking roof and appliances that actually worked. Maybe even retirement that didn't involve working until I dropped dead at my desk. For the first time in 3 years, I felt like I could breathe. That's when Daniel started calling. My son Daniel was 31 years old from my first marriage. After his father and I divorced when Daniel was 8, he'd bounced between us, never quite settling. His father got remarried quickly to a woman with money, and Daniel spent most of his teenage years with them in Scottsdale, going to private schools I could never have afforded. As an adult, Daniel had become distant. Polite but distant. We'd see each other on holidays. He'd text on my birthday. That was about it. Until I inherited the land. Suddenly, Daniel was calling 3 times a week, texting daily, always the same topic. Mom, you need to protect that asset. Put it in a family trust. Mom, people are going to try to take advantage of you. Mom, you need proper legal representation. Let me help you find someone. At first, I thought he was being helpful, concerned. He worked in commercial real estate after all. He understood these things better than I did. But then the calls became more insistent, more urgent. You don't understand how vulnerable you are right now, he'd said last week, his voice tight with something I couldn't quite identify. You need to do this for Stella, to protect her future. Something about it felt wrong. The pressure, the urgency, the way he never quite looked me in the eye during our video calls anymore. Then 2 weeks ago I discovered why. Stella was doing her homework on the family iPad at the kitchen table. I was making dinner, only half paying attention when she held it up. Mom, can I close this? I need to open my math app. I glanced over. An email was open on the screen. Daniel's email. He'd forgotten to log out. The subject line made my heart stop. Maternal capacity evaluation. Guardian options. Wait, I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. Let me see that. Stella handed me the iPad, already moving on to something else oblivious. I read the email slowly, my hands beginning to shake. From Daniel Sullivan to Richard Foster, attorney at law. Date May 28, 2025. Subject maternal capacity evaluation. Guardian options. Richard, thank you for taking the time to consult with me yesterday. As we discussed, I'm increasingly concerned about my mother's recent behavior following my aunt's death. She seems emotionally unstable and is making impulsive financial decisions without seeking proper legal counsel. Given that my 12-year-old sister Stella is currently in her care, I need to understand our options should her condition worsen. Could we schedule another meeting to discuss one? Legal steps required to petition for a mental capacity evaluation. 2. Emergency guardianship procedures for minor children. 3. Asset protection protocols during transition of custody. I want to ensure Stella's well-being is protected, as well as the family estate my mother recently inherited. Given her current state, I believe time is of the essence. Best regards, Daniel. I must have read that email 5 times each time, hoping I'd misunderstood. That there was some explanation that made sense. But there wasn't. Daniel wasn't worried about the land being stolen by strangers. He was planning to take it himself, and to do that he needed custody of Stella, because if I was declared mentally incompetent if he could prove I was an unfit mother, then he'd control everything. The inheritance, the property, my daughter. I'd saved that email to my phone, then cleared the browser history and closed the iPad, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. I didn't confront Daniel. Not yet. I needed to think, to plan, to figure out what to do. But I should have acted faster, because 3 days after I found that email, Caroline called. "Aria, hi, it's Caroline." My daughter-in-law's voice was bright and cheerful the way it always was. Caroline was 29, blonde, beautiful, and worked in marketing for some tech company in Phoenix. She wore expensive clothes and drove a BMW and always made me feel slightly shabby in comparison. "We've rented this amazing house near Lake Mojave for next weekend." She continued her enthusiasm, practically vibrating through the phone. "Just for 3 days, Friday through Sunday. We thought it would be perfect for some family bonding time. Just the 4 of us. No phones, no distractions, no stress. What do you think?" Every instinct I had screamed at me to say no. "That sounds nice," I heard myself saying, because Stella had just walked into the kitchen and her face had lit up at the words, Lake Mojave. "Mom, can we go?" she whispered urgently, pulling on my sleeve. "Please, I miss Daniel. We never do stuff as a family anymore." I looked at my daughter's hopeful face. I thought about that email, about Daniel's sudden interest in my mental competency, about the way Caroline was always watching me with those calculating eyes like she was assessing my value. I should have said no. "Okay," I said instead. "We'll come." Because I needed to know. I needed to see Daniel face to face to understand what he was planning. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe that email wasn't what it seemed. Maybe I was wrong about my own son. I wasn't wrong. The house Caroline had rented was exactly the kind of place you'd see in a luxury vacation magazine. Modern, spotless, floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over Lake Mojave, the water sparkling like diamonds in the late afternoon sun. The kind of place that probably cost $3,000 for the weekend. "You made it." Daniel was waiting at the door when we pulled up Friday evening. He looked thinner than I remembered his face, drawn with stress he was trying to hide behind a wide smile. Come in, let me help with your bags." He hugged me, and for just a moment I felt like I was hugging my little boy again. The one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. The one who'd held my hand at his father's funeral when I thought I might fall apart. "Hey, kiddo," he said to Stella, ruffling her hair. She grinned and hugged him tight. Caroline appeared behind him, perfectly put together in a white linen sundress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. "Aria, we're so glad you're here." She kissed my cheek, cool, efficient. Come in. Let me show you to your room." The house was spacious. Open-plan living room flowing into a chef's kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. Sliding glass doors opened onto a deck with comfortable furniture and a gas grill. Everything gleamed. Everything smelled like lemon cleaner and something floral I couldn't identify. "You're just down here," Caroline said, leading me down a short hallway past the kitchen. She opened a door near the garage. "We thought you'd like some privacy and quiet." The room was fine. Queen bed with a cream-colored duvet, a small dresser, a window facing the driveway. But it was far from the main bedrooms. Isolated. Easy to forget about. "Stella's upstairs with us," Caroline added quickly as if she'd read my mind. "There's a cute loft area with games and books. She'll love it." I nodded, smiled, said thank you, even as something cold settled in my chest. They'd separated us. Put me on one end of the house, Stella on the other. That evening we had dinner on the deck. Daniel grilled chicken and vegetables while Caroline set the table with cloth napkins and poured iced tea into mason jars. Stella ran around the yard chasing lizards in the fading light. The sun sank behind the ridgeline, painting the sky orange and purple. It should have been perfect. But Daniel barely looked at me. When I asked about his work, he answered in clipped sentences. When I mentioned the land in Mojave County, testing him, watching his reaction, his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "We should talk about that," Caroline said smoothly, passing me a bowl of coleslaw. "Estate planning, making sure everything's protected for Stella's future." "I have a will," I said carefully. "But a trust is better." Caroline continued her smile, never wavering. "Especially with a minor child. You want to make sure she's taken care of if..." She paused delicately. "Well, you never know what the future holds." I'm 48, I said, not dying. Of course not, Caroline laughed lightly. Just smart planning. We have some contacts, excellent attorneys who specialize in this sort of thing. Daniel said nothing, just stared at his plate, chewing slowly. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in the isolated bedroom near the garage, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the air conditioning. Around midnight I heard voices, low, urgent, coming from the deck. I got up slowly, moved to the window. Through the glass I could see Daniel and Caroline standing by the railing, illuminated by the soft glow of landscape lighting. I couldn't hear everything, just fragments carried on the night air. Tomorrow morning. Stick to the plan. That was Caroline's voice, calm and controlled. What if she doesn't drink it? Daniel, anxious, uncertain. She will. I'll make sure of it. You just need to... The wind shifted and I lost the rest. A long pause. Then Daniel again. I don't know if I can do this. You want to lose everything? Caroline's voice was sharp now. The house, your business. This is the only way, Daniel. You know it's the only way. My hands were shaking as I stepped back from the window. My heart hammered against my ribs. Stick to the plan. What if she doesn't drink it? This is the only way. I should have grabbed Stella right then. Walked out to the car, driven back to Chandler, locked the doors, and called the police. But I didn't have proof. Just fragments of a conversation I'd overheard. Just an email and a gut feeling that something was very, very wrong. And maybe, God help me, I still wanted to believe I was wrong. That my son, my Daniel, wasn't capable of whatever Caroline was pushing him toward. So I made the worst decision of my life. I decided to wait, to watch, to see what the next day would bring. I woke early Saturday morning, 6:30 according to my phone. I'd managed maybe 3 hours of sleep, my mind running in circles all night. Stick to the plan. What if she doesn't drink it? When I walked into the kitchen, Caroline was already there, humming softly as she worked at the counter. She was dressed in yoga pants and a tank top, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She looked fresh and rested and completely innocent. Good morning, she said brightly. Did you sleep well? Fine. I lied. Perfect. I'm making herbal tea for the boat ride. She gestured to a large thermos on the counter. Chamomile and mint. It really helps with motion sickness. The water on the lake can get choppy this time of year. I watched her work, watched her pour hot water from the electric kettle into the thermos, add tea bags, stir in honey with careful precision, screw the lid on tight. You'll love it, she said, turning to smile at me. I make it special. Something in her smile made my skin crawl. By 9 o'clock, we were loading into Daniel's SUV. Stella was excited, bouncing in her seat, talking about the fish she wanted to see. Daniel drove in silence, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. Caroline sat in the passenger seat, the thermos carefully secured in a cup holder. The marina at Cottonwood Cove was busy with weekend boaters, families loading coolers and fishing gear, couples in matching sun hats preparing for a romantic day on the water. Daniel handled the rental paperwork. I stood back watching as he spoke with the marina attendant, a weathered man in his 50s wearing a name tag that read Jerry. 2 boats today, right? Jerry was saying, checking his computer. Yeah, 2 of the small motorboats, Daniel confirmed. I frowned. Why 2 boats? Daniel didn't meet my eyes. More fun this way. You and Stella can have some mom-daughter time. We'll stay close. Every instinct was screaming at me now. 2 boats, not 1 family boat. 2 separate boats. But Stella was already running toward the dock, pointing at the boats tied up there, her life vest already strapped on. And I didn't know what to say. How to object without sounding paranoid or crazy or mentally unstable. That's what the email had said, wasn't it? Emotionally unstable. Making impulsive decisions. If I refused now, if I made a scene, would that just prove Daniel's case, give him ammunition to use against me later in court? So I followed my daughter to the dock. And I climbed into the boat that would nearly become my coffin. The boats were small, maybe 16 feet long aluminum with a simple outboard motor. Daniel spent a long time checking hours. Too long. He opened the engine cover, fiddled with something inside, closed it again. He checked the oars, tested them, then laid them back down. All set, he finally said. You remember how to start the motor right, Mom? I nodded. Michael had taught me years ago. Turn the key, let it warm up. Adjust the throttle. Great. We'll head out first, you follow. We'll stay close. Caroline came to the edge of the dock, the thermos in her hands. Almost forgot, she said with a laugh. Here, you both need to drink this. The sun is already brutal out there." She handed it down to Stella, who took it eagerly. "Thanks, Caroline." Stella unscrewed the top and took a long drink. It's good." Then she passed it to me. I held that thermos in my hands, and everything in my body was screaming at me not to drink it. What if she doesn't drink it? But Caroline was watching, and Daniel was watching, and Stella had already drunk from it, and if I refused now, if I threw it into the lake and demanded to go home, what then? What if I was wrong? What if it was just tea? What if I was losing my mind, just like Daniel's email had suggested? "Aria," Caroline's voice had an edge to it now, just the slightest sharpness beneath the sweetness. "You need to stay hydrated. It's going to hit 95 degrees today." I lifted the thermos to my lips, but I didn't drink. Not really. I took the smallest possible sip, barely enough to wet my lips, and pretended to swallow. Then I took another fake sip, tipping the thermos, but not letting liquid into my mouth. "There," I said, handing it back to Stella. "That's good." Caroline was still watching me with those cold, calculating eyes. "Make sure you drink more later," she said. "Both of you. Don't ration it." Then Daniel started his engine and they pulled away from the dock. We followed. For the first 20 minutes it was almost peaceful. The lake stretched out before us, the water a brilliant blue-green under the cloudless sky. Mountains rose in the distance, stark and beautiful against the horizon. The air smelled clean like water and desert sage. Stella laughed as spray hit her face. She took another long drink from the thermos, then set it down by her feet. "This is fun, Mom." "Yeah, baby, it's nice." Daniel's boat stayed maybe 50 feet ahead of us, close enough to see clearly. Close enough that if I waved, they'd see me. Then Stella yawned. "I'm kind of tired," she said, rubbing her eyes. My heart started to pound. "When did you drink that tea, honey?" "Just before we left, and just now again." She yawned again, wider. "Why am I so sleepy?" "We just woke up." Her words were starting to slur. No. "Stella, stay awake. Look at me. Stay." But her eyes were already closing. She slumped against the side of the boat, her head lolling. I grabbed her shoulders, shook her gently. "Stella, wake up." Nothing. Her breathing was slow but steady. She wasn't unconscious. It was more like she'd fallen into an impossibly deep sleep. My own head was starting to feel strange. Heavy. Like someone had filled it with cotton. But I'd barely drunk any. Maybe a few drops. Surely that wasn't enough to... I looked toward Daniel's boat. It was farther away now. 100 yards. Maybe more. "Daniel," I tried to shout, but my voice came out weak, thready. "Daniel, help." The wind carried my words away. I stumbled to the engine, my legs unsteady, turned the key in the ignition. It clicked. Nothing. I turned it again, and again. Click, click, click. With shaking hands, I opened the engine cover. The ignition cable was gone. Not loose, not disconnected. Gone. Cut clean and removed. The oars. Where were the oars? I spun around, searching the boat. The oar locks were empty. The oars that Daniel had so carefully checked, they were gone. In the distance, Daniel's boat was getting smaller. 200 yards. 300. I grabbed Stella, shook her harder. "Baby, wake up. Please wake up." But she was limp in my arms, her face peaceful like she was having the best sleep of her life. My vision was starting to blur, the edges of the world going soft and dark. I'd drunk more than I thought. Or maybe whatever Caroline had put in that tea was stronger than either of us could handle. I looked one last time toward Daniel's boat. It had stopped. Just for a moment. Caroline was standing in the back, her hand shading her eyes, looking directly at us. She knew. She could see that something was wrong. And she was just watching. Then Daniel started the engine again and they turned away, headed toward the shore. Away from us. Leaving us here. Leaving us to die. The thermos rolled against my foot. I picked it up with numb fingers, saw the note underneath it that I'd somehow missed before. "Mom, I'm sorry. You left me no choice." My son's handwriting. My son's words. The world tilted sideways. I tried to hold on, tried to stay conscious, tried to think of something, anything I could do. But the drug was too strong. The last thing I saw was the endless blue sky above me and the distant mountains blurring into shapes I couldn't recognize. Then nothing. When I woke up the second time, the sun had shifted. Not much, maybe an hour, maybe 2. but enough that the angle of light had changed. Enough that the heat had intensified from brutal to unbearable. This time I didn't panic. Something in me had shifted during those hours of unconsciousness. Maybe it was shock. Maybe it was the survival instinct that kicks in when you realize you're truly alone. But when I opened my eyes and saw that endless expanse of water, I didn't waste time on fear. I moved straight to assessment mode. Stella was still unconscious beside me, her breathing steady but shallow. I checked her pulse again, still strong. Her skin was hot to the touch, but not dangerously so. Not yet. I repositioned the life vest over her face to create more shade. Then I forced myself to think. The boat rocked gently beneath us, drifting with the current. I had no idea how far we'd moved in the past few hours. The shoreline looked the same in every direction, distant, hazy, unreachable. I searched the boat more carefully this time. In the small storage compartment under the seat, I found 2 bottles of water, one already opened, one still sealed. A single granola bar, a tiny first aid kit with Band-Aids and antiseptic wipes, and the thermos still half full of that poisoned tea. That was it. That was all we had. I did the math quickly. 2 people, maybe 30 ounces of water total in this heat. We had 12 hours, maybe less, before dehydration would start shutting down our organs, before Stella would start to know. I couldn't think about that. I looked toward the shore. 2 miles, maybe 2.5. I'd swum farther than that before. Back in college, when I was on the swim team, before life and marriage and children had turned me into someone who couldn't remember the last time she'd been in a pool. But that was 25 years ago. And I'd never swum after being drugged. Never swum with the sun beating down at 95 degrees. I looked at Stella's face, peaceful, trusting, completely vulnerable. If I stayed here with her, we would both die. There was no question about that. No boats had passed us in hours. We were invisible out here, just another speck on an endless lake. But if I swam to shore, I could get help. I could bring someone back for her. I could save her. The decision made itself. I gently shook Stella's shoulder. "Baby Stella, I need you to wake up for just a minute." Her eyelids fluttered. "Mom." "I'm here, sweetheart. Listen carefully." I kept my voice calm, steady, even though my heart was racing. "I need to swim to shore to get help. You're going to stay on the boat." "No." Her eyes flew open, suddenly alert with fear. "Don't leave me. Please don't leave me like Daniel did." The words were a knife in my chest. "I am nothing like Daniel," I said fiercely, taking her face in my hands. "I am your mother, and I will come back for you. Do you understand me? I will come back." Tears rolled down her sunburned cheeks. "Promise?" "I promise." I hugged her tight. "Now listen, you need to stay still. Don't waste energy. Keep the life vest over your head for shade. Drink the water slowly, just small sips. If you see another boat wave, but don't shout. Save your strength." I found the pen in the first aid kit. On the back of Daniel's note, the one that said I'd left him no choice, I wrote in clear block letters, "Aria Sullivan, 48. Stella Sullivan, 12, drugged and abandoned. Lake Mojave, June 14th, 2025. Contact 48-0555-0147. I tucked it under the sealed water bottle where it would stay dry. Then I kissed Stella's forehead, adjusted her life vest one more time, and before I could lose my nerve, I climbed to the edge of the boat. The water was colder than I expected. It shocked my system, jolted me fully awake. I looked back one last time. Stella was watching me with wide, terrified eyes. "I'll be back before you know it," I called. "I love you, baby." Then I started swimming. The first 15 minutes weren't so bad. I fell into a rhythm, a modified breaststroke that conserved energy. I'd kept my life vest on. It slowed me down, but it also meant I could rest when I needed to, just float for a minute and catch my breath. The shore didn't look any closer. I tried not to think about that. Just focused on the next stroke, and the next. One arm forward, pull through the water, breathe. Again. Again. My mind kept circling back to Daniel. Daniel at 7 years old, standing in our kitchen with chocolate cake all over his face, grinning up at me. I helped Mommy. I mixed it all by myself. Daniel at 10, crying in my arms after his father moved out. Why doesn't Daddy want to live with us anymore? Daniel at 15, showing me his acceptance letter to the math competition. His eyes had been so bright, so proud. "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom. You're the one who taught me not to give up." When had that changed? When had the boy who hugged me tight and called me his hero turned into the man who could drug me and leave me to die? I knew the answer. Caroline. 3 years ago, when Daniel had first brought her home for Thanksgiving, I'd seen it immediately, the way she assessed our modest house with barely concealed disdain. The way her eyes lingered on my worn furniture, my outdated kitchen. The way she asked questions about my finances, my retirement plans, my asset portfolio. "Your mother seems sweet," she'd said to Daniel later when she thought I couldn't hear. "But she's not very sophisticated about money, is she?" Daniel had started asking me for loans after that. $5,000 for a business opportunity that never materialized. $12,000 for a down payment on a condo. $15,000 to cover some unexpected expenses. I'd given it to him. Every time. Because he was my son, and you help your children when they need it. He'd never paid back a single dollar. My arms were starting to ache. I paused, treading water, trying to gauge the distance. The shore still looked impossibly far. The boat behind me had become a tiny white dot. Keep going. Just keep going. I thought about Michael, about what he would say if he could see me now. "You're the strongest person I know, Arya." He'd said that during his final weeks when the cancer was eating him alive, and I was the only thing holding our family together. Working full-time, managing his medications, helping Stella with homework, pretending everything was going to be okay, even when we both knew it wasn't. "You can do anything," he'd whispered the night before he died. "Promise me you'll take care of our girl, no matter what." I'd promised, and I was going to keep that promise, even if it killed me. After 30 minutes, the pain started. Not just aching muscles. Real pain. My shoulders burned with every stroke. My legs felt like lead weights dragging me down. The sun had baked my exposed skin, and now the lake water stung like alcohol on an open wound. I wanted to stop. God, I wanted to stop. But Stella was back there alone and scared and still drugged. So I kept swimming. My mind started to wander. Fragments of memory mixing with present reality until I couldn't quite tell which was which. Daniel's email to the lawyer. "She seems emotionally unstable." Caroline's smile as she handed me the thermos. "You need to stay hydrated." The note in Daniel's handwriting. "You left me no choice." What choice? What had I done that was so terrible it justified murder, inherited money, refused to hand it over quickly enough, failed to die conveniently so my son could pay off his debts? The thought hit me like a physical blow, and suddenly I understood. This wasn't about me at all. This was about Daniel's failures, his debt, his desperation, and Caroline whispering in his ear, convincing him that the only solution was to eliminate the obstacle standing between him and $4 million. Me, his mother. The woman who'd given birth to him, raised him, sacrificed everything for him. I was just an obstacle now. The rage that surged through me gave me a second wind. I swam harder, faster, channeling every ounce of anger into forward momentum. They thought I would just drift out there and die. Thought I was weak, helpless, just some middle-aged woman who didn't matter anymore. They were wrong. 45 minutes in, I started to lose focus. The shoreline was closer now. I could see individual rocks brush the detail of the ridgeline, but it still looked like miles away, and my body was shutting down. I tried to take another stroke and my arm barely moved. My legs had stopped kicking effectively. I was just floating, drifting. No, not like this. Not when I'm this close. I forced my arm forward, pulled, again. My vision was starting to blur. The water and sky were blending together in a wash of blue. One more stroke. I couldn't feel my body anymore. Just this strange, detached sensation of movement. One more. My hand hit something solid. Rock. Shallow water. I'd made it. I tried to stand and my legs buckled. I crawled instead, dragging myself forward through water that was now only inches deep. My hands scraped on stones. My knees hit sand. I pulled myself up onto the shore and collapsed. For a long moment I just lay there, gasping, shaking, unable to believe I was actually on solid ground. Then I remembered Stella. I forced myself to look back at the lake. I couldn't see the boat anymore. Too far, too small. Just endless water sparkling in the sun. "Hold on, baby. I'm coming. Just hold on." I tried to stand. Made it to my hands and knees before my body gave out again. That's when I heard it. The most beautiful sound in the world. The rumble of a truck engine. The man who saved my life was named Robert Hayes. He was 58 years old, an electrician driving home from a job site when he spotted me crawling on the side of the dirt road that ran along the shoreline. He slammed on his brakes so hard his truck fishtailed. A second later he was beside me, his weathered face creased with concern. Ma'am, can you hear me? I grabbed his arm with both hands. My daughter, boat, lake, 12 years old. Please. I didn't need to say anything else. Robert pulled out his phone and dialed 911 while helping me into his truck. He wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered despite the heat, and handed me a bottle of water. Slow sips, he said. Not too much at once. I listened to him talk to the dispatcher giving our location describing the situation. Woman late 40s, severe dehydration, possible drug exposure. Says her 12-year-old daughter is alone on a boat somewhere on Lake Mojave. Small white motorboat rental from Cottonwood Marina, disabled engine. He was so calm, so efficient, like he'd done this 1,000 times before. Coast Guard is on their way, he told me starting the truck. They'll find her. Let's get you to urgent care. I need to be there when they bring her in, I managed to say. You will be, I promise. I closed my eyes and prayed harder than I'd ever prayed in my life. Please let her be okay. Please let them find her. Please, please, please. 42 minutes later, I watched every second tick by on the truck's dashboard clock. My phone rang. Is this Aria Sullivan? Yes. Did you find her? Did you find my daughter? We have her, ma'am. She's dehydrated and sunburned but stable. We're bringing her to Desert Springs urgent care. She's asking for you. I started crying. Couldn't help it. Great heaving sobs that made my whole body shake. Robert reached over and squeezed my shoulder. See, I told you. She's okay. Your girl is okay. Desert Springs Urgent Care was a small clinic with peeling paint and a gravel parking lot. It was the most beautiful place I'd ever seen. They'd already set Stella up in a room when Robert and I arrived. She was lying on a hospital bed, an IV in her arm, her face red and puffy from sun exposure. But her eyes were open. Mom! I ran to her, gathered her into my arms as carefully as I could with all the tubes and wires attached to her. I'm here, baby. I'm here. You're safe now. She clung to me crying. You came back. You promised and you came back. Always, I whispered into her hair. I will always come back for you. A nurse came in, a woman in her mid-30s with kind eyes and a name tag that read Lisa Ramirez. She checked Stella's vitals, adjusted her IV, then turned to me. You need treatment too, Mrs. Sullivan. Let me get you set up in the next room. I don't want to leave her. I'll be right here, Mom, Stella said. She tried to smile. I'm okay. Get yourself fixed up. So I let them lead me to another room. Let them hook me up to my own IV, apply ointment to my burns, check my vital signs. Nurse Ramirez sat down beside me as the fluids dripped into my arm. The Coast Guard told us what happened, she said quietly. They found the boat just like you described. Disabled engine, missing oars, note about being drugged. She paused. Mrs. Sullivan, this wasn't an accident. No, I agreed. It wasn't. Who did this to you? I closed my eyes, opened them, said the words that I'd been avoiding for hours now. My son and his wife. Nurse Ramirez's expression hardened. I'm calling the police. Detective Sarah Cole arrived an hour later. She was a black woman in her early 40s, tall and composed with intelligent eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She carried a leather notebook and had the kind of quiet authority that made you trust her immediately. She pulled up a chair next to my hospital bed. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm Detective Cole with the Mojave County Sheriff's Department. Nurse Ramirez called me. She said you've been the victim of a serious crime. Attempted murder, I sadly said. The words felt strange in my mouth, surreal. My son tried to kill me and my daughter. Detective Cole didn't react with shock or disbelief. She just opened her notebook and clicked her pen. Tell me everything. Start from the beginning. So I did. I told her about Clara's death and the inheritance, about Daniel's sudden interest in my finances, about the email I'd found on the iPad, the one about mental capacity evaluations and emergency guardianship. Do you still have access to that email? Detective Cole asked. I took a screenshot. It's on my phone. Good. That's good. What happened next? I told her about the invitation to Lake Mojave, About the conversation I'd overheard the night before, stick to the plan, what if she doesn't drink it? About Caroline's thermos of herbal tea. About waking up on a disabled boat in the middle of the lake with Stella unconscious beside me. About the note Daniel left. I still have it, I said. In my pocket. It's damp, but you can read it. Detective Cole took the note carefully, studying Daniel's handwriting. And the thermos, she asked, should still be on the boat, along with the 2 water bottles and the granola bar. That's all they left us. She made notes quickly, her pen moving across the page. The Coast Guard recovered the boat. We'll process it for evidence. We'll also need blood samples from you and Stella. To test for drugs. Exactly. She looked up at me. Mrs. Sullivan, based on what you've told me, and the physical evidence we already have, the disabled engine, the missing oars, the note, I'm opening a full investigation. This is attempted murder and child endangerment. The relief that flooded through me was overwhelming. Someone believed me. Someone was taking this seriously. Will you arrest him? I asked. We need to build the case first. Blood tests, forensic analysis of the boat phone records. But yes, if the evidence supports what you've told me, your son and his wife will be arrested and charged. She closed her notebook. Can you think of anyone who might have witnessed what happened this morning? Anyone at the marina? The attendant. Jerry something. He checked us in. Daniel spent a long time looking at our boat's engine. Jerry might have seen that. I'll talk to him. Detective Cole stood. Mrs. Sullivan, I want you to know I believe you, and we're going to prove it. 2 days later, I was discharged from the hospital with instructions to rest and stay hydrated. Stella came home with me the same day. We went back to our house in Chandler and locked all the doors. I was terrified that Daniel would show up, that he'd come to finish what he'd started or to intimidate me into staying quiet. But he didn't come. Instead, 3 days after Lake Mojave, Detective Cole called with an update. The toxicology results came back, she said. Both you and Stella tested positive for lorazepam. It's a benzodiazepine, a strong sedative. How much did we have in our system? Stella had 0.9 milligrams per liter. You had 0.4. She paused. If you'd drunk as much as your daughter did, you might not have woken up at all. The amount she ingested was dangerous for a child her size. I closed my eyes. Stella had drunk so much of that tea, had begged for more because it tasted good. They'd nearly killed her. We also analyzed the thermos, Detective Cole continued. Heavy traces of lorazepam along with chamomile tea and honey, exactly like you described. We found Caroline Sullivan's fingerprints on the lid and your son's fingerprints on the body of the thermos. So they both handled it? Yes. We also examined the boat. The engine cable was deliberately cut, not worn, not accidentally damaged. Cut with wire cutters. And we found the missing oars in your son's boat when we tracked it down at the marina. My stomach turned. He took them from our boat and put them in his. That's what the evidence suggests. We also reviewed security footage from the marina. Your son spent 7 minutes examining your boat's engine before you arrived. That's unusual. Most renters take 30 seconds to check that it starts. Everything was falling into place. Every piece of evidence confirming what I already knew. My son had planned this, methodically, carefully. He'd planned to murder his own mother. There's more, Detective Cole said. We pulled phone records for the time you were missing from 11 a.m. when you left the marina until 8 p.m. when the Coast Guard found Stella. And your son made 2 phone calls during those 9 hours, both to lawyers. He made 0 calls to 911, 0 calls to the Coast Guard. He never reported you missing Mrs. Sullivan. The words hung in the air. He knew we were out there, I said slowly, and he did nothing. That's what the evidence indicates. We also talked to Jerry Wallace, the marina attendant. He said your son and daughter-in-law returned their boat around 4 p.m. that afternoon. He described them as calm and relaxed. They joked about the weather. They didn't mention you or Stella at all. I felt sick. We're building a strong case, Detective Cole said. But there's something else you need to know. We've been looking into your son's financial situation. And he's in debt, significant debt. Business loans, credit cards, personal loans. He owes approximately $474,000. I'd known Daniel was struggling, but $500,000. His wife has another $119,000 in credit card debt, Detective Cole continued. They're 4 months behind on their mortgage. Foreclosure proceedings were initiated in May. 1 month before the trip to Lake Mojave. They were desperate, I said quietly. Yes, and desperate people do dangerous things. There was a pause on the line. Mrs. Sullivan, I need to ask you something. Did your son have any life insurance policies on you? My blood went cold. I don't know. How would I find out? We're checking. If there is a policy and if Daniel is the beneficiary, that establishes clear financial motive. 4 days later, Detective Cole called again. Her voice was different this time. Tighter. We found something. What about? A life insurance policy in your name. $1.8 million. Beneficiary Daniel Sullivan. The world tilted. I didn't take out a life insurance policy. You signed the application 6 months ago. I tried to think. 6 months ago, January. What happened in... And then I remembered. Daniel had come to the house in January. He'd brought papers. Estate planning documents, he'd called them. Said they were important. Said they would protect me and Stella. I'd trusted him. I'd signed without reading carefully because he was my son and I trusted him. He lied to me, I said. He told me it was estate planning. I thought I was signing something to protect Stella. That's fraud, Detective Cole said. And combined with everything else, the drugging, the sabotaged boat, the abandonment, we have premeditated attempted murder for financial gain. She let that sink in. Then, Mrs. Sullivan, if you had died on that lake, your son would have collected $1.8 million within a few weeks. Combined with the inheritance he'd receive as your next of kin, $4.2 million from the land. Exactly. Total $6 million. $6 million, that's what my life was worth to Daniel. What his sister's life was worth. We're ready to make it arrests, Detective Cole said. But I want to warn you, your son will fight this. He'll hire expensive lawyers. He'll try to make you look unstable, unreliable. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Stella still having nightmares every night. About the burns on my arms from the sun. About the moment I woke up on that boat and realized my own child had tried to kill me. I'm ready, I sassy said. 1 week after Lake Mojave, a courier knocked on my door. I signed for the envelope, closed the door, and opened it with shaking hands. Legal documents, official court papers, emergency petition for mental capacity, evaluation and temporary guardianship of minor child petitioners, Daniel Sullivan and Caroline Sullivan now. I read through the document in disbelief. They were suing me. Daniel and Caroline, who had drugged me and left me to die, were now claiming that I was mentally unfit, that I was a danger to Stella, that I needed a psychiatric evaluation, and that they should be given temporary custody of my daughter. The petition painted a picture of a woman who was emotionally unstable following the death of her sister, who exhibited paranoid and erratic behavior, who endangered her minor child by taking her on an unsafe boating trip without proper preparation or supervision. They'd flipped the entire story, made themselves the concerned family members trying to protect Stella from her unbalanced mother. I called Detective Cole immediately. They're trying to muddy the waters, she said grimly. Make you look like the problem so that when we arrest them, they can claim you're just a vindictive ex-family member with mental health issues. Can they win? Can they take Stella from me? Not if I have anything to say about it. We have physical evidence, Mrs. Sullivan, toxicology reports, forensic analysis, their own phone records proving they didn't try to help you. She paused. But you need a lawyer, a good one. I don't have money for call Jonathan Webb. I've worked with him before. He specializes in family law and criminal defense. Tell him I sent you. I hung up and immediately called the number she'd given me. Jonathan Webb's retainer was $15,000. It was every penny I had in my savings account, the emergency fund I'd been building for years. But what choice did I have? I paid it. Jonathan came to my house that afternoon. He was in his early 50s with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. He sat at my kitchen table and reviewed the custody petition. This is a bold move, he said. Filing a custody petition when they're under investigation for attempted murder. Either they're incredibly stupid or incredibly desperate. Probably both, I said. He looked up at me. Detective Cole filled me in on the case. The evidence is strong, Arya. Very strong. But they're going to attack your credibility, your character, your fitness as a mother. Are you ready for that fight? I thought about Stella upstairs doing homework in her room, about the way she still flinched whenever someone said Daniel's name. about the locks she checked 3 times before bed. I want them in prison, I said. Both of them, Jonathan nodded. Then let's make that happen. Over the next 2 weeks, Detective Cole continued building the case. She obtained search warrants for Daniel and Caroline's house, their computers, their phones. What she found was damning. Daniel's laptop search history from 3 weeks before the trip. How long does it take to die from dehydration? Lake Mojave death statistics. Benzodiazepine overdose symptoms. How to disable boat engine without trace. Life insurance payout. Accidental death timeline. Are beneficiaries investigated for accidental death? He'd researched everything, planned every detail. There was also an email chain between Daniel and Caroline that made my blood run cold. Daniel to Caroline, May 15th. I can't do this. There has to be another way. Caroline to Daniel, May 15th. There is no other way. We lose the house in 60 days. My parents won't loan us more money. Your mother has millions. She won't even miss it. Daniel to Caroline, May 20th. What if something goes wrong? What if we get caught? Caroline to Daniel, May 20th. We won't. It's a boating accident. Old woman and kid on the lake engine fails. They drift too far. It happens all the time. No one will question it. And we'll be far away with a perfect alibi. Daniel to Caroline, May 29th. I made the reservation. Lake house for June 12th to 14th. Caroline to Daniel, May 29th. Good. I'll handle the rest. Just stick to the plan and don't lose your nerve. Detective Cole showed me these emails in her office. I read them 3 times, tears streaming down my face. Caroline had planned the whole thing. She'd pushed Daniel into it, manipulated him, convinced him it was the only solution. But Daniel had gone along with it. My son had chosen money over his mother's life. We have enough, Detective Cole said quietly. More than enough. The district attorney is ready to file charges. When tomorrow morning, attempted murder in the first-degree conspiracy to commit murder, child endangerment, insurance fraud, and forgery. Forgery. Detective Cole pulled out another document. We found something else. A will, allegedly signed by you 1 year ago, leaving 70% of your estate to Daniel and 30% to Stella. I stared at it. The signature looked exactly like mine. I never signed that. I know. We had it analyzed by a forensic document examiner. The signature was digitally scanned from another document and placed on this one. She opened a file and showed me another paper, a birthday card, the one I'd sent Daniel last year. Happy birthday, Daniel. I'm so proud of the man you've become. I will always love you. Mom, they'd taken my words of love and used them to forge a will. If you'd died on that lake, Detective Cole said, they would have collected the life insurance money immediately. Then, with this forged will, Daniel would have gotten 70% of your estate, including the $4 million property. Total close to $6 million. I couldn't speak, couldn't process the level of calculation and cruelty that had gone into this. Tomorrow morning, Detective Cole repeated. We arrest them both. The next morning, I woke up to my phone ringing. It was Detective Cole. It's done. Daniel and Caroline Sullivan were arrested at 6 a.m. this morning. They're being held without bail pending arraignment. I sat on the edge of my bed phone pressed to my ear and felt nothing. No relief, no satisfaction, just emptiness. My son was in jail. The boy I'd raised, the man I'd loved unconditionally, was in jail for trying to murder me. Aria, Detective Cole's voice was gentle. Are you okay? No, I said honestly. But I will be. Stella appeared in my doorway. Mom. Who was that? I held out my arms. She climbed into bed with me, curled against my side like she used to when she was small. That was Detective Cole, Isati said. Daniel and Caroline have been arrested. They can't hurt us anymore. Stella was quiet for a long moment. Then good. Just that one word. But it said everything. We lay there together as the sun rose, neither of us speaking, both of us trying to figure out how to move forward from this. How to rebuild a life that had been shattered by betrayal. How to trust again when the person who hurt you was supposed to love you most. I didn't have the answers yet, but I knew one thing: we were alive. We were together, and that was enough to start with. 3 months passed between the arrests and the trial. 3 months of therapy sessions for Stella. 3 months of sleepless nights for me. 3 months of preparing to face my son in court and tell the world what he'd done. Jonathan Webb prepared me well. We went through my testimony dozens of times. He asked me every horrible question the defense attorney might ask, made me practice keeping my composure, taught me how to answer without breaking down. "They're going to try to make you look unstable," he warned. "Paranoid, overly emotional. You need to stay calm, factual. Let the evidence speak for itself." But how do you stay calm when you're testifying against your own child? The trial started on a cold October morning. The courthouse was a squat concrete building in downtown Mojave, surrounded by desert scrub and empty parking lots. Inside it smelled like old paper and floor polish. I walked through the metal detectors with Stella holding my hand on one side and Jonathan on the other. My best friend Sandra had flown in from Florida to be there. She sat in the gallery right behind us. "You've got this," she whispered, squeezing my shoulder. "That boy is going to pay for what he did." Then I saw him. Daniel sat at the defense table in a navy suit I'd never seen before. His hair was shorter. He looked thinner, older. The past 3 months in jail had aged him. He didn't look at me. Caroline sat beside him, perfectly composed as always. Designer clothes. Where did she get those in jail? And her blonde hair smoothed back in a neat bun. She glanced at me, once her expression utterly blank, like I was a stranger. The judge entered. Judge Harrison, 60-something, stern-faced, with iron-gray hair and reading glasses perched on his nose. "All rise for the Honorable Judge William Harrison." We stood. "The State of Arizona versus Daniel Sullivan and Caroline Sullivan," the clerk announced. "Case number CR-2025-4892. Charges attempted murder in the first degree, 2 counts. Conspiracy to commit murder. Child endangerment. Insurance fraud. Forgery." The words hung in the air like poison. My son was on trial for trying to murder me. The district attorney stood for her opening statement. Violet was in her mid-40s, sharp-eyed and commanding in a black suit. Her voice filled the courtroom. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about greed. Pure, simple, devastating greed. It's about a son who valued $6 million more than his own mother's life, more than his 12-year-old sister's life." She walked toward the jury box, making eye contact with each of the 12 people who would decide Daniel's fate. "The evidence will show that Daniel Sullivan systematically planned and executed a plot to murder his mother, Aria Sullivan, and his sister, Stella Sullivan. He purchased a life insurance policy on his mother without her knowledge. He researched how long it takes to die from dehydration. He disabled a boat. He and his wife drugged them both with a powerful sedative. And then," she paused for emphasis, "he sailed away and left them to die in the middle of Lake Mojave on a day when the temperature reached 97 degrees. One of the jurors, a woman in her 60s with gray hair, pressed her hand to her mouth. "This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. This was cold, calculated, premeditated murder for financial gain. And we will prove it beyond any reasonable doubt." She sat down. The defense attorney stood next. Paul Brennan was younger than I expected, late 30s. Handsome in an artificial way, with perfect hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began smoothly, "what you've just heard is a tragic story. But it's not the whole story. What happened on Lake Mojave was indeed terrible, but it was not murder. It was a series of unfortunate events, a misunderstanding, a family outing that went horribly wrong." He gestured toward Daniel, who kept his eyes down. "Daniel Sullivan loves his mother. He always has. Yes, he made mistakes. Yes, there were errors in judgment. But attempted murder, conspiracy, these are serious charges that require serious proof, not just circumstantial evidence and assumptions." Several jurors looked skeptical. "Good. We will show that the evidence is incomplete, that there are other explanations for what happened, that this is a case of a grieving, confused woman who has turned a terrible accident into a criminal conspiracy." He paused. "And we will ask you to carefully consider whether the state has truly proven guilt beyond a reasonable doubt." He sat down with a confidence I wanted to slap off his face. But Jonathan had warned me about this. He's going to try to create doubt. That's his job. Our job is to make the truth so clear that doubt is impossible. Judge Harrison looked at the prosecution. "Ms. Rhodes, call your first witness." The state calls Detective Sarah Cole to the stand. Detective Cole was an excellent witness. She walked the jury through the entire investigation with calm precision. The 911 call from Robert Hayes, the Coast Guard rescue, the discovery of the disabled boat. What did you observe about the boat's condition? D.A. Rhodes asked. The engine cable had been deliberately cut, Detective Cole said, not worn through or corroded cut cleanly with wire cutters or a similar tool. The oars were missing entirely. Later, we found those oars in the defendant's boat. She projected photos onto a large screen. The cut cable, the empty oar locks, the note in Daniel's handwriting. And what did that note say? Mom, I'm sorry. You left me no choice. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Did you find any drugs in the boat? Yes. A thermos containing chamomile tea and significant traces of lorazepam, a powerful sedative. We found Caroline Sullivan's fingerprints on the lid and Daniel Sullivan's fingerprints on the body of the thermos. More photos. The thermos. The fingerprint analysis reports. And the victim's blood tests. Both Aria and Stella Sullivan tested positive for lorazepam. Stella had nearly twice the concentration as her mother, a dangerous amount for a child her size. D.A. Rhodes let that sink in. Detective Cole did the defendants report Aria and Stella missing during the 9 hours they were on the lake. No, ma'am. Phone records show Daniel Sullivan made 2 calls during that period, both to attorneys. 0 calls to 911. 0 calls to the Coast Guard. 0 calls to anyone who could have helped. And when did they return their rental boat? 4:15 p.m. The marina attendant described them as calm and relaxed. They joked about the weather. They never mentioned that their family members were missing. On cross-examination, Paul Brennan tried to poke holes. Detective Cole, isn't it possible the engine cable broke naturally? No. The forensic analysis was definitive. It was cut. Isn't it possible Mrs. Sullivan misremembered the events due to the drug in her system? Her account was consistent with all physical evidence, the toxicology results, the disabled boat, the note. Everything she told us was verifiable. But you can't prove my client intended murder, can you? Maybe he just wanted to scare. He researched how long it takes to die from dehydration, Detective Cole interrupted calmly. He cut the engine cable. He removed the oars. He left them without food or water in 97-degree heat. Those aren't the actions of someone who wants to scare somebody. Those are the actions of someone who wants them dead. Brennan had no response to that. The prosecution called witness after witness, each one adding another piece to the damning puzzle. Jerry Wallace, the marina attendant. Mr. Sullivan spent a long time checking the engine on his mother's boat. 7-8 minutes, maybe. That's unusual. Most folks just make sure it starts and they're good to go. The forensic computer analyst. He walked the jury through Daniel's search history displayed on the large screen for everyone to see. How long does it take to die from dehydration? Lake Mojave drowning statistics, life insurance payout, accidental death timeline. Are beneficiaries investigated if death is accidental? One juror shook his head slowly. Another woman wiped her eyes. The insurance agent. Mr. Sullivan took out the policy in January. Mrs. Sullivan believed she was signing estate planning documents. She had no idea this was a $1.8 million life insurance policy with her son as the sole beneficiary. The forensic document examiner, Dr. Patricia Thornton. She explained how Daniel had forged a will using the signature from a birthday card. D.A. Rhodes held up that card in its plastic evidence sleeve. She read it aloud. Happy birthday, Daniel. I'm so proud of the man you've become. I will always love you. Mom. Her voice was quiet, devastating. He took his mother's words of love and used them to steal her estate after he killed her. I saw 2 jurors crying now. The financial analyst. He detailed Daniel and Caroline's debts. Nearly $600,000. Foreclosure proceedings. Bank accounts overdrawn. Credit cards maxed out. Would you say the defendants were under extreme financial pressure? D.A. Rhodes asked. Absolutely. They were facing complete financial ruin. The evidence was overwhelming. Each piece built on the last until the picture was complete and undeniable. My son had planned to kill me for money. On the 3rd day of the trial, D.A. Rhodes called me to the stand. The state calls Aria Sullivan. My legs shook as I walked to the witness box. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. The whole truth and nothing but the truth. So help me God. I sat down. The courtroom was silent. I could feel everyone watching me. The jury, the judge, the reporters in the back row, Sandra in the gallery, and Daniel. For the first time since the trial started, he was looking at me. D.A. Rhodes approached with a kind smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Sullivan." "Good morning. Can you tell the jury what happened on the morning of June 14th? I took a breath. Jonathan had prepared me for this. Stay calm, factual, let the evidence speak. Caroline gave us a thermos. She said it was herbal tea, chamomile, and mint. She said it would help with motion sickness on the lake. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. Stella drank first, several large sips. Then I drank. Did the tea taste unusual? A little. It was sweet, but there was something bitter underneath. But I trusted them. They were family. What happened next? About 20 minutes later, Stella said she was tired. Then she collapsed. I realized something was wrong. I tried to start the engine, but the key was missing. I looked for the oars. They were gone. I looked back at Daniel and Caroline's boat. It was getting farther away. I shouted for help, but they just kept going. My voice cracked slightly on those last words. I paused, took a breath. What went through your mind in that moment, Mrs. Sullivan? I thought I had to stop, swallow hard. I thought my son is leaving me to die, the child I raised, the boy I sacrificed everything for. He was leaving Stella, a 12-year-old child, his own sister. What did you do? I had to save Stella, so I swam, 2.5 miles to shore. While drugged, I'd only taken small sips, not enough to fully knock me out. But Stella had drunk more. She was unconscious. If I didn't get help, she was going to die out there. D.A. Rhodes let that image settle over the jury. A mother swimming for her life while her drugged daughter lay helpless in a drifting boat. Mrs. Sullivan, do you love your son? The question caught me off guard. I looked at Daniel. He was crying now, tears streaming down his face. I did, I said quietly. I still do. That's what makes this so hard. Because after everything, after he tried to kill me, after he left his sister to die, he's still my son. But love doesn't mean I can let him get away with what he did. D.A. Rhodes nodded. No further questions. Paul Brennan stood for cross-examination. His smile was gone now. He knew I was a credible witness, and he needed to damage me. Mrs. Sullivan, you've been under a lot of stress these past few months, haven't you? Yes. Your sister died. You inherited a large sum of money. That's a significant life change. It is. Isn't it possible that the stress affected your perception, that maybe you misinterpreted? I didn't misinterpret anything, I said firmly. I found the email where Daniel was planning to have me declared mentally incompetent. I overheard him and Caroline talking about the plan the night before. I woke up on a boat with no engine, no oars, and a note from my son saying I left him no choice. I didn't imagine any of that. But you were drugged. Your memory could be... I remember everything. The taste of that tea. The look on Caroline's face as their boat pulled away. The note Daniel left. I remember waking up thinking I was going to die and my daughter was going to die because my son valued $6 million more than our lives. My voice was strong now, angry, good. Mrs. Sullivan, do you have children, Mr. Brennan? He blinked. That's not relevant. Do you have children? Yes, 2. Would you leave them on a boat in the desert sun with no food, no water, no way to call for help? Would you drug them first so they couldn't save themselves? Objection. Brennan was red-faced, argumentative, sustained, Judge Harrison said. But the jury had heard it. Brennan tried a few more questions, but I didn't break. Jonathan had prepared me too well. When I stepped down from the stand, I felt lighter. I'd told my truth. The whole courtroom had heard what Daniel did. Now they just needed to believe it. The prosecution rested after 5 days of testimony. The evidence was overwhelming: physical proof, financial motive, search history, emails, phone records. Everything pointed to premeditated attempted murder. The defense called only 2 witnesses, a psychiatrist who suggested I might have misremembered events due to trauma and drug exposure. The jury looked skeptical, and a character witness who said Daniel was a good man who made mistakes. Several jurors rolled their eyes. Then, on the 6th day, as D.A. Rhodes was presenting the forged will as final evidence, something happened that no one expected. Daniel stood up. I didn't... His voice cracked. Caroline said it was just a backup plan in case... His lawyer grabbed his arm. Daniel, sit down now. But Daniel shook him off. He was looking at me now, tears streaming down his face. Mom, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. We needed the money so badly. Caroline kept saying it was the only way, that you'd be okay, that someone would find you quickly. I didn't think— Daniel, Caroline hissed. Shut up right now. But he couldn't stop. The words were pouring out of him like poison he'd been holding in for months. I never wanted this. I tried to back out, but Caroline said we'd lose everything. The house, the business, everything we'd worked for. She said you had millions and wouldn't even miss it. She said, D.A. Rhodes turned slowly toward him. Her voice was deadly calm. She said what Mr. Sullivan— Objection, Brennan was on his feet. Your Honor, my client is clearly distraught and not thinking— Overruled. Answer the question, Mr. Sullivan. Daniel looked at Caroline. She was glaring at him with pure hatred. Then he looked back at me. She said you'd never know what happened, that it would look like an accident, that no one investigates old ladies who die on boats. He was sobbing now. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I never meant I didn't want to kill you. I just wanted the money. The courtroom exploded. The judge banged his gavel. Caroline was screaming at Daniel. Brennan was trying to get control of his client. The jury was staring in shock. And I sat there numb, listening to my son confess that he'd been willing to let me die for money. After order was restored, D.A. Rhodes stood. Your Honor, the defense has repeatedly claimed that this was an accident, that there was no intent to harm. Mr. Sullivan has just admitted in open court that this was a deliberate plan to cause the death of his mother for financial gain. The state rests. Judge Harrison looked at the defense table. Mr. Brennan. Brennan looked defeated. The defense rests, Your Honor. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. 6 hours of waiting in that small room with Jonathan and Sandra, drinking bad coffee, pacing, praying. When the clerk called us back, my heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. The jury filed in. Their faces were serious, unreadable. Has the jury reached a verdict? Judge Harrison asked. The foreman stood. He was an older man, maybe 65, with kind eyes. Yes, Your Honor, we have. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree regarding Aria Sullivan, how do you find the defendant Daniel Sullivan? Guilty. A collective exhale swept through the room. On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree regarding Stella Sullivan, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, guilty. On the charge of insurance fraud, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the guilty, Daniel dropped his head onto the table. His shoulders shook with sobs. The judge turned to Caroline. And for the defendant, Caroline Sullivan, the foreman repeated, guilty on all counts. Caroline showed no emotion. She just stared straight ahead, her jaw tight. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel relieved. I just felt tired. It was over. Finally, over. 2 weeks later, we returned for sentencing. The courtroom was packed. Victims' rights advocates, reporters, people from the community who'd followed the trial. And Sandra right behind me like always. Stella stayed home. She wasn't ready to see Daniel yet. Maybe she never would be. Judge Harrison looked down at Daniel from the bench. His expression was grave. Mr. Sullivan, you have been convicted of conspiring to murder your own mother and endanger the life of your 12-year-old sister for financial gain. In 30 years on this bench, I have seen many terrible things, but few actions have been as cold, as calculated, and as fundamentally evil as what you did. Daniel kept his head down. You researched how to kill them. You planned every detail. You drugged them. You disabled their boat. You took away every means of survival. And then you sailed away and went about your day while your mother swam for her life to save your sister. The judge's voice was hard as steel. You are sentenced to 22 years in the Arizona State Prison System. You will be eligible for parole after 14 years. Daniel's head shot up. Mom, he started to say. You will not address the victim, Judge Harrison said sharply. He turned to Caroline. Mrs. Sullivan, while the jury found that you were not the sole architect of this plan, you were an active and willing participant. You encouraged your husband. You provided the drugs. You handed them the poisoned tea. You watched them drift away knowing they would likely die. Caroline's perfect composure finally cracked. This is ridiculous, she said. He was the one who— You will remain silent unless asked to speak, Judge Harrison said coldly. You are sentenced to 18 years in state prison. You will be eligible for parole after 12 years. For the first time since I'd met her, Caroline looked afraid. The bailiffs moved forward. Daniel and Caroline were led out in handcuffs. Daniel looked back at me one last time. His lips moved. I'm sorry. I looked away. 3 weeks after the sentencing, a letter arrived at my house. Prison stationery. Daniel's handwriting. Dear Mom, I know I have no right to ask this. I know what I did was unforgivable. But if there's any part of you that still loves me, the little boy I used to be, the son you raised, please come visit me. Just once. I need to explain. I need you to understand. Please, Mom. Daniel. I stared at that letter for 3 days. Sandra told me not to go. You don't owe him anything, Arya. He tried to kill you. Jonathan said the same. There's no legal reason to see him. You can move on with your life. But I couldn't move on. Not yet. Not without doing this one last thing. I needed closure, and I needed to look my son in the eye and tell him goodbye. So I drove 2 hours to the Arizona State Prison Complex in Florence. The visiting room was cold and institutional. Gray walls, bolted down tables, guards watching from the corners. I sat behind a glass partition, picked up the phone, and waited. Daniel appeared on the other side. He'd lost more weight. His prison uniform hung loose on his frame. He looked 10 years older than when I'd last seen him in court. Mom, his voice broke on the word. Thank you for coming. I didn't think you would. I almost didn't. I'm sorry. I know I've said that 100 times, but I need you to know I'm so sorry. For everything. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I tried to see my little boy, the one who'd held my hand, the one who'd promised to take care of me. But all I could see was the man who'd left me to die. Do you know what you did to Stella? I asked quietly. He flinched. She checks the locks 3 times before bed. She has nightmares about drowning. She's in therapy twice a week. She flinches when someone says your name, your sister, a 12-year-old child. I never wanted to hurt her, he whispered. I swear, Mom, I thought— You thought what? That it would be okay, that she wouldn't be traumatized by watching her mother nearly die, by being abandoned on a lake. Caroline kept saying you'd be found quickly, that it would just scare you into signing over the truth, Daniel. My voice was hard now. Tell me the truth. He was silent for a long moment. Then, I knew you might die. I knew it was possible. And I did it anyway because I was desperate and scared, and Caroline convinced me it was the only way out. At least he was being honest now. Was my life really only worth $6 million to you? I asked. Because to me, you were priceless. He broke down, put his head in his hands and sobbed. I watched him cry and felt, nothing. No sympathy, no forgiveness, just a strange, sad emptiness where my love for him used to be. Will you ever forgive me? He finally asked. I thought about that, really thought about it. I forgive you, I said slowly. Not for you, for me. Because I won't let your choices poison the rest of my life. I won't carry hatred and rage for the next 20 years while you sit in here. That's not who I am." Hope flickered in his eyes. "But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation," I continued. "I forgive you, and I'm walking away, forever." "Mom, please, will you visit again? Maybe bring Stella someday when I get out we could know Daniel." I stood up. "I came to say goodbye, that's all." "Mom," his voice was desperate now. "Please, you can't just—" "I can, and I am." I looked at him one last time. "Goodbye, Daniel." I hung up the phone and walked away. I didn't look back. In the parking lot, I sat in my car and cried for 10 minutes. Not for the man in that prison. For the little boy who was gone. For the son I'd loved who'd never really existed. For the family we would never be. Then I dried my eyes, started the car, and drove home to Stella. To the life we were going to build together. Without Daniel. Without the weight of his betrayal holding us down. I'd spent 3 months preparing to testify. 3 weeks deciding whether to visit him. But it only took 10 minutes to say goodbye. And somehow that felt right. 6 months after the trial, Stella and I moved. We couldn't stay in Chandler anymore. Too many memories. Too many people who knew our story. Too many reporters wanting interviews. We found a small house in Prescott, Arizona. 3 bedrooms, a yard with an oak tree, a quiet street where nobody knew who we were or what we'd survived. Stella painted her room yellow. Hung string lights across the ceiling, put up posters of her favorite bands. She had control over her space. That mattered now. She was still in therapy, but she was better. The nightmares had dropped from every night to once or twice a week. She'd made 2 friends at her new school, Emma and Sophie. They came over for sleepovers, giggled over pizza, painted each other's nails. She laughed more, trusted more. Slowly, carefully, she was learning to be a kid again. I kept working as a freelance accountant, but I also started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping survivors of domestic violence. Women who'd been betrayed by family, by partners, by people they'd loved. I found purpose in that. If my story could help even one person find the courage to leave, to fight to survive, then maybe it had all been worth something. The land in Mojave County sold for $12 million. $12 million. More than even the appraiser had predicted. Jonathan helped me set up an irrevocable trust for Stella. The money was locked away until she turned 25. By then, with careful investment, it would be worth even more. She'd never have to worry about money. Never have to depend on anyone who might hurt her. That gave me peace. We built new rituals. Saturday morning pancakes. Movie nights, comedies, only nothing dark. Sunday walks in the park. Small joys that rebuilt the bond between us. One Saturday afternoon, Stella was in the backyard throwing a ball for the golden retriever puppy we'd adopted. We'd named her Hope. Sandra had come to visit for the weekend. She sat next to me on the porch, drinking iced tea, watching Stella play. "You did it, Aria," she said quietly. "You really did it." "We did it," I corrected. "You helped me through everything." "That's what friends do." She squeezed my hand. "How are you really doing, not the brave face you put on for everyone else? Really, I thought about that." "Some days I'm okay," I said honestly. "Some days I'm strong and I feel like we're going to be fine. Other days I cry in the shower where Stella can't hear me. I have moments of rage where I want to drive to that prison and scream at Daniel until my voice gives out." "That's normal. I know. My therapist keeps telling me that healing isn't linear, that it's okay to have bad days." Smart therapist. We sat in comfortable silence watching Stella chase the puppy around the yard. She was laughing, really laughing. The sound made my chest ache in the best way. "Do you think you'll ever date again?" Sandra asked. I snorted. "Who would want me? I come with trust issues, a traumatized kid and a son in prison for trying to murder me." "Someone who deserves you," Sandra said firmly. "Someone who sees how incredible you are. But there's no rush. Take your time. Maybe someday," I thought. But not now, not yet. For now, I just needed to focus on healing, on Stella, on building a life that felt safe and stable and ours. One evening a few weeks later, Stella came into the kitchen while I was making dinner. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course, honey." She was quiet for a moment, picking at the edge of her hoodie. "Do you think about Daniel?" I put down the wooden spoon and gave her my full attention. "Sometimes. Do you?" "Yeah, I miss him. The old him, before all this happened." Her eyes filled with tears. Is that bad? Am I bad for missing him? No, sweetheart. I pulled her into a hug. You're not bad. It's okay to miss the person you thought he was. I miss that person too. But he tried to hurt us. I know. And that's why he can't be part of our lives anymore. But missing him doesn't make you bad. It makes you human. She cried against my shoulder for a few minutes. Then she pulled back, wiping her eyes. I don't want to visit him, she said firmly. Not ever. That's your choice, and I support it. But maybe, she hesitated, maybe someday I could write him a letter, just to tell him how I feel. Someday, when you're ready, if you're ever ready. She nodded. Okay. Then she went back to her homework, and I went back to dinner, and life continued in its quiet, healing way. A year after Lake Mojave, I woke up and realized something extraordinary. I'd slept through the night. No nightmares, no panic attacks, just sleep. I walked into the kitchen to find Stella already awake, making pancakes. Morning, Mom, I thought I'd surprise you. Well, you succeeded, I hugged her. What's the occasion? No occasion, just wanted to do something nice. She flipped a pancake expertly. We're going to be okay, aren't we? I looked at my daughter, 13 now, taller, stronger, more confident than she'd been a year ago. Still healing, still struggling sometimes, but fighting her way back to herself. Yeah, baby, we're going to be okay. And for the first time since that terrible day on the lake, I believed it. That afternoon, I did something I'd been thinking about for months. I wrote my story down. All of it. Every terrible, heartbreaking, triumphant moment. Not for me. For the other survivors out there. The women who'd been betrayed by family, who'd been told they were crazy or paranoid or too emotional, who'd survived against impossible odds and needed to know they weren't alone. I wrote about the warning signs I'd missed, the email I'd found, the conversation I'd overheard. The moment I woke up on that boat and realized my son had tried to kill me. I wrote about swimming 2.5 miles while drugged, about Robert Hayes who'd stopped his truck and saved my life, about Detective Cole who'd believed me when I thought no one would. I wrote about the trial, about watching Daniel confess in court, about visiting him in prison and saying goodbye. And I wrote about healing, about moving forward, about learning to trust again slowly and carefully, about forgiveness not for him, but for myself. When I finished, I read it through. Then I sent it to a publisher who specialized in true crime and survivor stories. 3 months later, they called. They wanted to publish it. The book came out a year later. Left to Drift, a mother's survival story. I wasn't sure anyone would read it. Who wanted to hear about family betrayal and attempted murder? But they did read it. Thousands of them. I started getting letters, emails, messages from women who'd survived their own nightmares. Your story gave me the courage to leave my abusive husband. I thought I was going crazy when my family tried to steal my inheritance. Your book showed me I wasn't alone. My son stole from me for years. I felt like a failure as a mother. Thank you for helping me understand it wasn't my fault. Each letter was a gift, proof that something good could come from something terrible. I started speaking at survivor groups, at women's shelters, at conferences about elder abuse and family violence. And every time I told my story, I ended the same way. Survival isn't heroic. It's desperate. It's clawing and fighting and refusing to stop. I survived not because I was strong. I survived because I was terrified. And fear can be just as powerful as strength. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I forgave Daniel so I could move forward with my life, but I never have to speak to him again. Both things are true. And finally, you are allowed to leave toxic family. You're allowed to protect yourself. You're allowed to choose peace over obligation. Blood doesn't make family, love, loyalty, and respect make family. 2 years after Lake Mojave, I was sitting on my porch at sunset watching Stella play with Hope in the yard. My phone buzzed. A text from Sandra. Saw your book hit the bestseller list. So proud of you. Call me when you can. Love you. I smiled. Set the phone down. Breathed in the cool evening air. I thought about Daniel sometimes. Wondered how he was doing in prison. Whether he'd changed. Whether he understood the magnitude of what he'd done. But mostly I didn't think about him at all. I thought about Stella's laugh. About the women I'd helped through my advocacy work. About the life I'd built from the ashes of betrayal. People ask me how I survived, how I got through it, how I forgave. The answer is simple. I didn't have a choice. When you have a daughter depending on you, you find strength you didn't know existed. And I learned that the worst betrayals come from the people you trust most. But they don't have to define you. You can choose to move forward, to heal, to build something beautiful from the wreckage. Money changes people, or maybe it just reveals who they really were all along. Daniel chose $6 million over his mother's life. But to Stella, I was everything. And that's the difference between greed and love. I survived because I refused to let his choices poison my future. I healed because I chose forgiveness over hatred. And now Stella and I have a life that Daniel can never touch again. A peaceful life, a safe life, a beautiful life. And that's the best revenge of all. Stella ran up to the porch, breathless and grinning. "Mom, can we have tacos for dinner?" I laughed. "Absolutely, sweetheart. Tacos sound perfect." A simple moment, an ordinary moment, a beautiful moment. Proof that we'd survived, that we'd healed, that we'd won.